have to make sure that your campsite that it's running 30 amps. If you happen to be at a site that only has 50 amps, we do have an adapter in here that you can convert. Additionally, there's also a 110 converter if you wanted to plug into a regular outlet. Just keep in mind, if you do that, the RV will power on, but you cannot use the microwave or the air conditioner when using this outlet. It must be plugged into 30 amp to be able to do so. So once you grab the cable out of here, we're going to walk back to where you hook this up to the RV itself. There's one of the twist connectors, and all you do is you flip up this little guy, and this goes in a little bit off to the side, like almost like pointed up at like 11 o'clock, and push it in, and then you just twist it until it's vertical, and then that's locked in. After you plug in the receptacle to the RV, there is a little screw connection that just secures it. It's not really part of the actual connection itself. It just prevents it from being pulled out. So you can kind of make sure that's nested and screw that on snug. Then on the other end of the cord, we do supply a surge protector, which you should always keep this plugged in. This just protects the electronics on the RV in case there was an electrical surge at the outlet itself. So coming over here to the outlet, most RV campsites that have outlets like this will have a 50 amp outlet as well as a 30. And then they usually have a standard 110 as well. But because this is the 30 amp, we're gonna plug this in first. It's always best practice to make sure that the circuit for the 30 amp is turned off before you plug in. And then once you're plugged in, power this on. And if it's not windy, you can actually hear the RV power on right when it does that. There's a little beep and the microwave turns on. I'll point out right here, we're not going to hook this up, but this is the cable hookup. If you are staying at a campground that supplies cable TV, you can hook up a coax cable, which we do have in the electronics container inside to watch TV. Next, we're going to hook up the city water or fresh water to the plumbing on the RV. Inside this large container is where we keep all the kind of freshwater supplies. We also have this little kneeling bench, which is quite nice. You can put this on the ground if you need to kneel. You can flip it over and it turns into a seat. So we'll use that when we hook up the sewer connections next. Alright, the white hose is the freshwater hose, so this will be used for the fresh drinking water. One end there'll be a pressure regulator connected to it. This down regulates the pressure coming out of the spigot into the RV plumbing. It's critically important this is on, and this is what will screw into the outside of the RV, so we'll do that first here. There's a city connection right here. This is where the hose for the RV will hook in. There's also a freshwater tank that will fill before you leave, but if you do need to fill it back up, you can fill this with a hose. This is just a standard connection here, so I'll go ahead and screw this in. These are just plastic fittings. This is obviously brass. This pretty tight. If it's not tight enough, you'll see water spraying out and you'll know it needs to be a little tighter. Then you take the other end of this hose and connect it to your camp. So once your two connections are hand tight, you can go ahead and turn on the water from the spigot. Just check for any leaks coming out of here and coming out of the RV, and then you're good to go. So inside the freshwater area where we took out the white hose, there are some gloves in here that I do recommend using anytime you're messing with the sewer connections. So I'm going to put those on quickly here, and we'll connect the least glamorous part of camping. So just below the gas tank and the water hookup is where the sewer connectors are. So inside here, there'll be the Stinky Slinky, which I'll go ahead and take out here. There's two ends to this. This is the end that will hook into the pipe in here, and then the elbow joint will go down into the sewage connection in the RV. But once you come on in here, I'm going to point out a couple things. Inside here, there is a black valve and a gray valve. You'll be able to see this better in person. Those, you want to make sure those are closed at all times unless your hose is completely hooked up. But there's an end cap on the sewage connection that you'll need to screw off to the left. And then there's also a little cover over the hole that we're going to rotate the sewer connector into. So right now the sewer connection end is pointing out towards us, but we need to rotate it down. So if you gently press on the top, the hose connector should point down. Then this little Neely tray comes in handy because you can grab your end of the hose and reach underneath here, and you want to get it on the connector itself, and you twist it to lock it in place. Get in here with my right hand. All right, so now that's locked and latched in place. Then we'll walk over here. These hoses stretch out about 10 feet. And all campsites will be a little bit different. This one just has a little end cap, but you're just going to basically push that down and kind of seat it in place. Back in the same container where the leveling blocks are located, there's also a support hose for the sewage hose. I'm going to slide that out of here. This is just bungeed together, and we'll show you how this works here in a second. Alright, so we're going to put the support on the hose. This just provides a gentle slope for the waste to flow down. You can unhook the bungee, and then this is literally like an elastic piece you can kind of throw out. You just want to position your hose underneath it, kind of get it in line. Provides some support as water's flowing through there. It's quite a heavy, so this provides support to the hose and allows it to adequately drain. So once you've connected your sewer hose to the RV and the campsite, something you can do that's kind of a best practice is this first portion of the hose, you can kind of stretch this down and create a little J. What this will do is it'll form a little trap where some of the water will sit in there, and it'll prevent any sewage smell from coming in and smelling it through your sinks. So that's kind of a best practice when you're at the campsite. Come on in here and I'll show a couple of the things with the valves. One of the best practices when you're in the RV site, if you're going to be at an RV site for several days, it's okay to open up the gray valve and leave that open. So I'm going to do that now. These you just pull forward. There's a little bit of water in here now, and so that's flowing through the pipe and down into the waste. You do want to keep your black valve closed until you're ready to dump. So always keep that closed unless your black tank is starting to get full and you need to empty. Now I'm going to show emptying the sewer tank. This is the least fun part of RVing, but pretty painless if you follow the steps appropriately. Before you empty the black tank, you want to make sure your gray tank is pretty full of soapy wastewater. That helps you flush out the hose after you've emptied the black tank. But for the sake of this demo, I'm going to show using the flush as well. So I've closed the gray tank, and I'm going to empty the black tank. So you just make sure once your connectors are up, you'll pull the black handle, and that's when wastewater from the sewage will flow out into the dump site. You know it's wastewater because it will be brown. So once your tank is empty, and you've emptied your gray tank as well to flush out the tube, we always want you to flush out the black tank too with the hose connector. That flushes the walls of the tank and prevents any clogs or other issues in the future. So anytime you empty the black tank, it's best to flush it out. We have a 15-foot hose that's already connected to the Sani flush in here. So if you just reach in and pull out the curly Q hose, the green is going to be the one you'll flush your tanks with. So I'm going to connect this hose to the other spigot in this case at the campsite. And now once that's connected, I still have my black valve open, so I'm going to just turn on the hose. So right now I'm filling up and flushing the black tank. I temporarily close the valve, but you definitely want to make sure that's open and not closed for too long, because you don't want to fill up the black tank, which will then overflow inside the RV. So I'm going to pull the black tank open, and now as you'll start seeing, you'll see a bunch of wastewater, but now fresh water is actually flushing the tank and cleaning out the inside. You want to continue doing this until the water that's flowing out is clear again. It doesn't have to be crystal clear, but you want it to be relatively clean because you know the sidewalls of that black tank are completely flushed and washed out.